Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is about husbands and wives having this opposing marriage goal, and they don't realize it.
And I would bet that you're not going to guess it, because this is really an interesting nuance that we have observed in our thousands and thousands of private sessions with couples over the last almost decade of doing sessions. And it even came up in our couples workshop this last weekend. We were so grateful to host an amazing workshop in Arizona, and couples flew from all over the country, and even Canada came over. So we loved it. And this came up in several conversations that I had with the couples particularly. And before we kind of say what it is, I just want to point out how important it is to be clear on what your goals are or what your aim is in your marriage. Because if we don't have that, it will just be by default, right? Like by default, it might be like, well, I hope we survive this thing, right? Or, well, I hope we're okay. I hope you're all right and satisfied in the relationship, right? It's just more by accident.
Yeah, or it just might be, I think for a lot of men I can speak to, the default is I'm just getting done my task management. I'm just doing the things I set out to do. I'm going to work. I'm coming back, or maybe you don't go anywhere anymore, but I do my work, I come down, we make dinner, play with the kid. Mm-hmm. It's just, like you said, it's the routine. And I think men are often driven by routine. Yeah. But if you're not cognizant, as you said, to what your aim actually is for doing that routine, then the routine becomes very boring and mundane. You just lose a lot of the juice of life. And as you know from us, you're going to face challenges in life, and so it doesn't really prepare you to deal with the challenges. So when things are outside of your routine, then you don't know how to cope, and then you can emotionally spill over on your partner. That was from a couple episodes ago. And yeah, to your point, we got to know what we're aiming at.
And when we aren't being purposeful and intentional, then what can be running the show is our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind, again, is often programmed from like our upbringing and what is comfortable to us or what's familiar to us, not necessarily what we want in life. And so it's either your subconscious mind running the show, kind of like a blind spot, right? When you're driving and you can't quite see it. Or you can intentionally create a focus and an aim as a couple. And we've been talking about this a lot with the couples we work with in our sessions. Like, okay, what is your aim? Let's not just focus on what you see are the problems. Of course, we need to identify those and create new patterns and focus on the skills. But you also have to know, like, what is it that you're moving towards? What is your aim? Do you even have that? And so we're about to go into what this is, because I know you're all sitting at the edge of your seat like, okay, what is the difference? I do want to say this is a generalization. Of course, there's exceptions, because we're going to talk about things we see men in particular having as their goal and women in particular. Of course, there's always exceptions. Human beings aren't the exact same. However, it is a very common theme that we notice. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with how men versus women are conditioned. And even just if you think about like what sitcoms are like even just the funny ones like Seinfeld, Friends, I'm trying to think of what some of the other like family-oriented ones, there's particular ways that the men and women are portrayed. And so I just want to say that, don't get upset. If you're like, no, Freemans, it's the opposite for us, that's okay. You can say, you know what, it's actually in reverse for us. It's going to be one of you, the other of you. But again, this is a theme that we notice, and I would bet it's going to resonate with a lot of you.
So before Jocelyn reveals it,
it's like the reveal.
I want to distinguish aim from goal then.
Okay.
So the aim that you were talking about, let's put on a long-term, potentially short-term duration. And when you're not necessarily focused on that, you default, like you said, to what's familiar, and you also default to much, much shorter term focus. That's how I see this playing out. So there's a certain goal that husbands default to, which end up becoming a very short-term goal, not necessarily an aim. And then the whys, maybe theirs is slightly different, but can still more in the short term say, hey, this is what's missing for me and is the goal. Yeah. Differentiated from medium to long-term aim.
Okay. Yeah. That timeline, I get what you're saying there. Okay. Let's not keep them in suspense any longer.
Okay.
So what we notice is that for the husbands, their goal is to avoid conflict and or just not have issues in the relationship. Not even, and even to put another word to it, it's like, I don't want my partner to be upset with me is another way that we hear it, right? And then the wife's goal is to create connection, to feel close. Now, just hearing those, do you see how those not only are different goals and things to be focusing on, but they are going to change how you act and operate within the relationship for the positive or negative. You two aren't on the same page if those are the things you're each trying to create. So let me break it down further. And Aaron, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on these, but this is what I wrote out. So if I'm the husband and I'm aiming for no conflict, actually I want to avoid it altogether because avoidance is different than preventing. And we'll talk about that in terms of what's a better combined goal, because that's where we're going to take you at the end of this is like, okay, what should we be focusing on together then? Avoiding conflict is totally different than preventing conflict, and we'll get to that. But if I'm trying to avoid it, then number one, I'm going to hold things in, even if they are actually important to me and or it could build into resentment. I'm going to hold it in because I don't want to start a fight. I don't want to know what your reaction will be. We're having a perfectly fine day. I'm already tired anyway. It's the end of the day or it's the end of the week. I don't want another thing that's going to drain, more of the energy. So I'm going to hold it in. Go ahead.
I want to advocate for the men a little bit.
Okay.
So this is just how I heard it. The words to me that you said were perfectly fine. That's even how I know some people think of it. Mm-hmm. But, and this is funny to do this, but the tone makes it seem like it's negative. And I do want to point out, it often does seem like a very positive intent for men. So it sounds more like this to me, I think, in their mind, in their emotion. Hey, it's going just fine today. So why would I bring that thing up? Well, there's no need for me to comment on that. And also, I would say, we're looking around our environment. Things are going great. I also don't want anything to be brought up with me. Listen, it's from a very different, I think, there is a positive intent there. We're not saying this is even the goal you should have.
Right.
And that's why it's tricky, because it does seem like I am setting out for a positive thing. Mm-hmm. Hey, this is going just fine. This feels better than the previous week, let's say. So I'm going to not get into that conversation, or I'm going to try to keep myself in a particular environment in which there's no reason to bring up things with me, right? And it might sound like that's stupid of me to even say, but honestly, I do feel like that's how it lands. And then that, like you said, that creates a certain behavioral pattern within me. And
I definitely think there's a lot of truth to that. I didn't mean to portray it in a totally negative sense. Yeah. But here's the other nuance. And I just talked to a husband an hour ago, right? Because I needed to give him some perspective from the female perspective with something they were dealing with, him and his wife. And I asked him, I said, well, are there things that bother you or that you aren't getting met in the relationship? And he said, yes. And the reason that it's not getting brought up is because of this. I don't want to, spark a conflict. But here's the thing. It then does get brought up in the heat of the moment. And this is where it can create this like negative pattern, is because they're holding it in because sure, okay, everything's fine today. Mm-hmm. But it will come out when the wife brings something up, right? Or the heat of the moment, something else gets triggered. So then it's brought up in like a blindsiding way. Like, where did this all come from? I didn't even know you're feeling that. So let's go to the next one, right? So that's one of the ways this affects the dynamic. The second is that I would not want to upset my partner. So I may say yes to certain things. Like if they're asking me to do something, or whatever, bringing up a certain topic, and I'll say yes because I want to please them. I want to make them happy. And I think if I shared my perspective or I, fought for my perspective, it would just be a bigger issue. So I'll say, all right, fine. All right. Yeah. What you want? Just more appeasing. Or we talk about this like saying yes out of compliance at times. So again, some positive intention in there, like we get where you're coming from. But if
I think less than this one.
Okay. What do you say about this one?
I think more often I just see it as get off my back, but it's not even that strong. It's more like I'm just trying to relieve myself from this tension in this moment. So sure.
Or it always goes your way anyway. We'll hear that sometimes.
Yeah, maybe. So I think this one is from a little bit more of a kind of negative, get off my back type of energy. Mm-hmm. There's a few times where it's not even really worth saying. There's times where you comply and you have the intention to do it, but what you don't factor in is the level of priority it is for them or what it's going to take you to do it and what you might have to sacrifice. And so when it's when you're in the actual situation, you don't do it because you don't even realize that all your other priorities are way ahead of what you complied with and you don't even remember it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another one. But I think in this case, it is more of the kind of get off my back type thing.
So then here's another. So again, if I'm the husband and I'm aiming to avoid conflict or just not have conflict in the relationship, then I will even subconsciously try to fix my partner's feelings. So if they bring something up, even if it's not related to me, it's some other subject and they're upset, sad, frustrated, stressed, whatever the emotion is, I'm going to try to fix that. So even some positive intention in there, but the delivery is actually going to be opposing to what the other partner wants because the other partner, it doesn't want their feelings to be fixed. They actually just want the feelings to be heard, to feel as though there's a safe space, to just be able to, have it be said and just have my partner say, I hear you, like, or I get it, or I understand, or mirror it back. Like, I hear you. You're frustrated. You're sad, whatever that is. And so
let me add for the men. I think just this piece, there still is the avoiding of a conflict. And I think a lot of men have the belief that listening to a partner's emotion or experience, that's a pathway to further conflict.
Say more about that. Like just
that's really it. So I'm trying to fix your feeling because, hey, let's just kind of move on past this. Mm-hmm. Because I think there is a belief for men that my partner has emotion, so that means we're heading towards a path of conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that was even a part of our book, and that's just something you have to understand. Like, oh, just because my partner has emotion, there's a way I could listen and be receptive where this doesn't actually turn into a conflict. But I think that's collapsed for most people. That's
true, in that we have to be able to be with some tension, be with emotion, and that's different than fighting against each other, right? Because no one wants to get into destructive conflict. So we're going to talk about that again. So before we go to then the wife and what her goals are and how that's showing up in her actions, if you can hear, if your goal is to avoid conflict, all of these actions that we just outlined, while there may be some positive intent in there, or you think it's for a good reason, it's going to actually affect your partner's desire for closeness or their sense of feeling close to you. Because here's why. I feel close. This is me as the female partner speaking. I feel close when you open up to me. I can sense you're upset, your body language or your facial expression or your tone. It's clear something's on your mind. And I just want you to open up to me. Us being able to talk about things, the good and the bad, makes me feel close. So when we can't do that, it is actually triggering that deep core need that I have. And I want us to be able to be receptive to each other. That, we're able to open up to each other about these things. I don't want you to fix my feelings. I don't want to fix yours. I just want us to be able to share them and have a safe space for that, and that we both feel heard in conversations. So that's me sharing from the female perspective, and I know men can feel that way too. Again, this is a generalization. We already gave that disclaimer. Should we go to the wife now?
Lay it on us.
Okay. So now on the other side, right? I'm the wife and I'm aiming for, my goal is to create connection and closeness. So if that's what I'm focusing on, I'm going to want to talk about anything and everything. I want to be able to be expressive with my feelings. Now, on the receiving end, that could feel potentially, especially if there's negative feelings coming out. I said this to you the other day. I need to be able to emote, right? I need to be able to let what I'm feeling on the inside be expressed on the outside, of course, within reason, always. But that's going to, on the other side, potentially be perceived as an issue or conflict or something that's now going to become this whole thing derailing our day. And definitely, I just want to say that something I've had to work on, and I say this to women a lot in general, all partners really, is that we have to be discerning about what needs to be said and what is something for us to process first. And also what timing is best, what is most appropriate, when to bring it up. If my partner's exhausted or the love account is low because we had a rough week and we've been off, maybe it's not the time for me to bring that thing up. I have to be discerning about this. Is this really that important? Or do I need to go take a bath? Do I need to go on a walk? Something like that. So that discernment is very, very important. Now, the next one. So again, if I'm the wife wanting to create connection and closeness, I'm also going to want to nip issues in the bud, right? I'm going to want to resolve issues, have it be done. I don't want there to be lingering tension. I don't want a topic to have no resolution. I want to make sure we're on the same page. So therefore, I'm going to want to sometimes push to have a conversation, which we can do sometimes in productive ways, sometimes in not productive ways, right? I'm like, no, I can't go to sleep until we resolve this. Or I feel like we can't have a good rest of the week until we actually talk about it and come to an agreement.
Rest of the week?
I'm just talking.
Even the day.
Sure, day. Anytime.
I'm talking about it right now.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like, no, we need to talk about it because I feel when we're on the same page and things are resolved, I feel close. I don't feel close when it's not resolved. But again, on the receiving end, that could feel either draining or like, why? Like, we're having a perfectly nice Saturday. Why does this have to be brought up today?
Or that there's always criticisms.
True. It could be perceived as that too. Like that there's some criticism, some negative. So see how those are conflicting. It's like one of you's like, can we have a good day and like not have a conflict, not have issues? And the other person's like, I feel close and connected when we resolve issues and we're on the same page. So do you just see how you're operating in two different ways that could actually create conflict? That's the joke of this all, is that even though there's some positive intention, your way of adapting to this is actually going to create the thing that you don't want, which is distance and conflict. One more point and then I'll let you go because I know I've been going for a bit. But again, I'm the wife wanting to create closeness and connection. Then I want to make sure we're good. I want to make sure that you're happy, you're satisfied. I don't want to go through our relationship making assumptions. So I want to talk about our relationship, right? I want to know you're satisfied in our intimacy and that you feel our communication is good and that you're satisfied in how we parent together. So I'm feel close to you when I know we're both satisfied and happy. So that means talking about the relationship. On the receiving end, again, that may be perceived as tension or bringing up an issue. And so just notice too how much there's just differences in perceiving these attempts to connect versus seeing that as sparking a conflict. So anything more you want to say about those points of like the wife's intentions and actions?
No, you already covered, the delivery, the timing, how it's brought up. I think a lot of times it can come off as blame. I mean, that's at least how I experience it sometimes. And, like, oh, well, I need to be able to have emotion. And I know the men's argument is, even for those of us, I think, that are good listeners and are wanting to understand, it's like, yeah, I'm available for that, but you're blaming me for how you feel. So I think that's kind of the argument. I know when I get defensive, I think that's my defensive stance.
Yeah.
Even had it the other day. You're like, oh, I just need to be able to emote. And I'm like, emote all you want. If you share about yourself, you're making it sound like you're blaming me for that. And I'm like, that's not, So then I'm coaching and then
Right.
different things like that.
Yeah, and delivery always matters, right? Like we can always refine how we say things. And remember, we talked about this in the couples workshop this weekend in Arizona, is that, communication really is both partners stepping up to the plate and focusing on their role. You have to be good at the person that's the sender, the person speaking. And you also have to be good at being the receiver, the listener. Both roles are important, and you can't always blame it on the sender or always blame it on the receiver. It's really both people saying, all right, I'm going to get better at refining how I say things. The other person, okay, I'm going to get better at how I receive them and listen.
I think the last thing for me to close this out, it seemed like a really good opportunity to categorize different scenarios and the skills that will be required in them. So our book, The Argument Hangover, we talk about before, during, and after conflict as a easier way to think about skills and tools. The before is about prevention, during is about de-escalation, and after is about repair. So I think what we're saying here is in the realm of there's no current conflict. This is how you express needs. It's how you assert yourself. It's about your communication in your daily life that isn't just about task management, that actually brings some closeness and just a sense of togetherness. Mm-hmm. So in that, men go about the route of having the goal of avoiding conflict, and then women's sort of general aim in the daily life interactions is to drive closeness. Mm-hmm. So I don't want anyone to get that confused with the particular skills for de-escalation or repair, because that might not necessarily be the right skill to use.
Yeah, for sure. And so actually on that point, I wrote here, what's a better combined goal then to this specific topic? Because like what you're just outlining, yes, there's many other skills and tools to be focusing on, but related to this conflicting goal that we're outlining in this episode, here's the combined goal. And I encourage you to write it out and have this be a focus for you guys, is that we create true harmony because we're able to proactively communicate, be receptive to each other, and create win-win solutions always.
That we follow through on.
That's a good addition there, that we follow through on. I think this is very, very important because we'll ask couples, we're like 2 or 3 sessions in with them, and, we'll start off with like, hey, give us a sense of some wins or some challenges in the last week. And one partner may say like, well, the good news is we didn't fight. And so I'll say, all right, great, in a sense. Here's the difference though. Did you not fight because you're avoiding topics and you're like just holding things in, or did you quote unquote not fight because you're actually proactively communicating? Those are two different things. And so that's the focus. Don't get caught up in trying to avoid conflict because of all those reasons we outlined. It doesn't work. Get better at proactively communicating, being receptive to each other, creating win-win solutions. Always, and with his point that you follow through on. Mm-hmm. So I hope you write that down, focus on that. We hope that this really like just made you laugh a little bit, but also that you see really how important this is to have as a focus. If you know you need to get better at this communication and you don't want to just get inspired for a day, you actually want to do this consistently, dive into our resources. If you're new here, we have guides from the family meeting guide to the de-escalating conflicts guide. We have several of those, as well as our 30-day couples challenges that give you daily prompts to be strengthening your connection, your communication, how your interactions go. So you can see all of our resources available at meetthefreemans.com/links. And it's really going to be exactly what you're looking for, which is about making it actionable and having it be something that you implement into your lives. Because that's what really matters. It's not just getting inspired for a minute, but actually implementing it. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can hear past and future episodes. And if you take away value from our podcast, it would mean so much if you would give us a 5-star rating on whichever platform you're listening on. That helps us reach even more couples. And with that, we are so grateful that you tuned in today, and we will talk to you on the next episode.